Hey guys, it's Miles from Milesfit, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Ask Miles show. Happy Thursday, everybody. I hope you've been having an awesome week. As promised, today it's noon, and we're shooting the next episode of the Ask Miles show. In this episode, we have another 3 awesome questions that we're going to explore today. Questions having to do with cravings, questions having to do also with the great gluten, and also some questions that we'll explore at the end to be determined. All right, so let's check out what's going on here. Give me a second. All right, so let's get set up with the questions. And there we go. All right, so the first question that we have today is, what's the best way to deal with cravings? Cravings. All right, so before we get into how to deal with cravings, let's take a look first at why we might have cravings. So we could be having cravings for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons that we might be having cravings is because of stress. When your body is in a stressed state, it's natural and normal that you're going to crave food. And typically, you're going to crave sugary and sweet things. And there's actually some science behind that. It doesn't just happen by accident or haphazardly. There's actually some physiological chemistry there that makes a lot of sense. So when you're in a stressed state, your stress hormones, cortisol, go up. And when your stress hormones go up in the body, one of the ways to downregulate stress hormones is actually with the release of a hormone called insulin. And one of the ways that you get your body to secrete insulin is through eating carbs and sugars and spiking your blood sugar levels. Because when you consume those carbs and you release insulin, as insulin goes up and is activated in the body, your stress hormones will be downregulated. So as I mentioned, it's quite natural to crave sweet foods and sugary foods when you're in a stressed state. Now, although that might be the innate biochemistry of your body, the fact of the matter is, if you consume a lot of carbs and sugary foods, that's going to have negative repercussions on your body composition and your physique. So we'll get to how to actually bypass and circumvent that in a little bit. Right now, we're just exploring why you might have cravings. So stress would be one of the top reasons. A second reason why you might have cravings is because you're not eating enough food. So a lot of people, especially people on a crash diet who are under eating and not getting enough calories, when your body is in a deprived and a hypocaloric state. In other words, you're not getting enough food to nourish your body, to nourish your metabolism, to fuel your cells, and to energize your body. When you're in that state, your natural response will be to want to eat food, to have cravings. The body is basically saying, go eat food, give me nutrients, give me energy. So when you're in that hypocaloric state, i.e. not eating enough food, your body will intuitively create these cravings for you to go and eat food to give it the nourishment it needs to function. Now here's the thing. Thousands of years ago, we didn't have all these convenience stores and grocery stores. We couldn't just go at any time that we wanted to go and buy whatever we wanted. Hundreds and thousands of years ago, the foods we would consume would come from our environment. They would be seasonal, they would be local, and they wouldn't be processed. So a couple hundred or thousand years ago, you couldn't find chips and chocolate and cake and all of these types of things easily available. So that's one of the problems today. We're very blessed and we're very fortunate, and we should be very grateful for the amazing access that we have to all of the food that's around us. Really, it's convenient. We have convenience stores, grocery stores. I mean, we really are a spoiled population and spoiled society. But at the same time, when we have those cravings, we have a lot more destructive products, unfortunately, at our disposal. And fact of the matter is, when people are craving, let's say, sweets, they're not going to usually reach for fruit. They're probably going to reach for a candy bar or some cake or a cookie or a box of cookies, as many people might eat, right? A whole box. So when we're in that hypocaloric state and we're not getting enough food, your body will naturally crave food, which leads to those problems. Okay? So stress and not eating enough food are two of the main reasons why we have cravings. And the fact of the matter is, with stress, we're a stressed society. We've become desensitized from stress because it's the norm. In other words, everybody is so stressed that we just assume that it's a normal and natural state. But the fact of the matter is, just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. We shouldn't mistake being in a stressed state as normal. But the fact of the matter is, we are in a stressed state and we will have cravings, especially at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, after a full day of work or activities or being engaged in things, that's really the opportunity where most people have that time to unwind. And it's in that zone where you're going to unwind that you're most susceptible to cravings and to overeating. We almost use food as a tool to be able to regulate our stress and change our emotional state. And the fact of the matter is, when you consume food and you have this release in your body of certain hormones and neurotransmitters, you feel better. So food is a gateway to change your emotional state as well. And one of the best ways to do that, and most people do that, is to consume sugary foods, because you get that hit immediately. It tastes good, there's variety, it changes your state. And like I said, when you eat sugary foods and carbohydrates and you release insulin, that will downregulate your stress hormones. So you'll have that temporary stress relief, yet unfortunately, there's a lasting repercussion to that, which is a negative shift in your body composition. Because if you eat a bunch of carbs and a bunch of sugar right before you go to bed to try to deal with stress hormones and stress, well, that's going to create a negative effect. It might taste good and you might be happy in the moment, but unfortunately, there's going to be negative consequences to your actions as a result of consuming those foods when you were in that state of craving them. So let's look at a couple ways now, because the question really was, what's the best way to deal with cravings? So if your cravings stem from not eating enough food, simple answer, eat more food, okay, throughout the day, spaced out. But here's the thing, you have to gradually increase your calories. You can't just say, well, I'm eating too little food, let me just bump up my calories and eat a ton of food all of a sudden. That will come as a radical shift to your body, and you'll probably gain fat as a result of that. So if you are under eating and the solution to mitigate those cravings is to increase your calories, you want to do so slowly. So you might increase your calories anywhere from 100 calories a week and see that point where cravings start to subside. Also, what's important to note in the department of food, it's what kind of food are you consuming? If you're consuming heavily processed foods and you're consuming foods with a lot of sugar, those things will probably perpetuate, unfortunately, those cravings. So quality of food is a big component of the equation as well. So a lot of people also get cravings because of that blood sugar dysregulation. And one of the ways in which you can regulate blood sugar is by increasing your fiber intake. So through vegetables and fruits, especially lots of salads and greens like broccoli and asparagus and cabbage and things like that. Increasing your fiber intake will actually slow down the digestive process and slow down the rate at which glucose enters your bloodstream and the rate at which insulin is released and how your hormones are regulated. So increasing your fiber intake as part of increasing your calories is a very important strategy. Also, it's been shown that fat, healthy fat, so we're talking about olive oil, avocados, coconut oil, unfried, unsalted nuts and seeds. Fats also help slow down the digestive process and regulate hormones in the body, which will regulate your blood sugar levels and which will help with cravings. Okay? Protein. Protein is another component. If you're not getting enough protein in your nutritional plan, that will also lead to some cravings. So when it comes to food amount, if you're under eating, you want to gradually increase your calories a little bit. When it comes to type of food, you want to make sure you're consuming enough protein, enough fiber, and that you're consuming also enough healthy fats. So those three are three key pillars and components to making sure your body's balanced. Now, a couple other reasons that you might be having some cravings. Dehydration, that's a common one. A lot of people mistake being hungry for actually being thirsty. So if you're not drinking enough water or starting the day with a tall glass of water and continuing to drink water throughout the day, you might actually have cravings as a result of not being properly hydrated at the cellular level. So making sure you're getting enough water is critical as well. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of strategies that you can use and implement to help deal with cravings. It's about pinpointing what exactly is the case for you. And the way you get to the bottom of that is not by changing 10 variables at once. If you change too many things too fast, you won't have any idea what caused what. You'll be totally left in the dark. So the rule is, whenever manipulating variables and making changes and trying to isolate what is causing what, you want to change one thing at a time and observe, which is basically part of the scientific method. You make a change, you have a hypothesis, you observe, and you see what kind of results happen through that change. If you see positive results and you're getting the results you want, great, you've just found your solution. If you have not achieve the result you wanted by making that switch, now you can make another switch. So when you make a change, you want to give yourself at least 1 week to be able to observe if that change is having a positive impact on your results. So just to reiterate and to recap a little bit, if you're not eating enough food, you'll have cravings. So the solution to that would be to gradually increase your calories over time, slowly, 100 calories a week, observe, see what's going on, etc. The quality of the food, the type of food you're consuming also will impact cravings. If you're not getting enough protein, if you're not getting enough fiber, if you're not getting enough healthy fats, these are also things you have to consider. And finally, hydration and water. So you want to explore those things, and hopefully examining those components help you get to a point where you reduce your cravings. Now, when it comes to cravings with regards to stress, that gets a little bit trickier. Why? If you have things in your life that are stressing you, big things, for example, your job or relationships or your finances, unfortunately, those things aren't going to disappear overnight. We wish they would, but they're not. So the reality is that stress is going to be there. So the question then becomes, okay, if I'm in a stress state, yes, I'm going to work towards addressing the cause eventually, finances, relationship, career, etc., etc. But in the meantime, how do I deal with intense cravings in the evening after work or at the end of the day, and I feel very susceptible to consuming carbs and sugar and fat and processed foods? Well, that's a little bit trickier, but thankfully there are practical strategies that you can do. So a couple ways to be able to get around that are as follows. Number one, if you're having a craving, a strategy that you can use is actually to get some type of minty flavor in your mouth. How would you do that? 1, brushing your teeth. 2, chewing some gum. We've been neurologically conditioned that when we brush our teeth or chew gum, the meal is over. When we have that minty, fresh sensation on our palate, we're not really going to be craving sweets and sugary foods. Now, the key in order to be able to implement either of those strategies, brushing your teeth or chewing gum when you have a craving, is that you have to be aware that it's a tool in your toolbox. A lot of the time, we just operate on autopilot. In other words, we're just reacting to the environment without even knowing it. We're having cravings, we're craving sweet things. Without even thinking, we just reach for those cakes, cookies, all that bad stuff we know we shouldn't be eating. But if you have in your mind this game plan that, oh, if I have a craving, now I have tools in my toolbox and strategies I can use. So, boom, go and brush your teeth. Boom, go and chew some gum. So by being aware that you have those tools that you can use, that awareness will permeate your reality, and you'll be cognizant of the fact that you can get out of the craving with those tools. So awareness really is a pivotal component of being able to get around those cravings in the evening. But like I mentioned before, if your stress is leading to the cravings and the etiology of your stress has not been addressed, long term, you're constantly going to be band-aiding the situation rather than addressing the root cause and going deep and hitting it at the source. But the fact of the matter is, it's better to at least have a temporary band-aid on to be able to deal with the craving versus just giving in and going bonkers on carbohydrates and sugars and sweets and processed foods and perpetuating this chronic negative state of a bad physiology and bad body composition. So those are some strategies for dealing with cravings. And that's stuff that you can start implementing right away. It's very tactical. It's very practical. You can integrate and use that immediately. So tonight, if you're suffering from cravings, brush your teeth, chew some gum. That would be a temporary solution. If you are waking up the next day and you want to start to change your lifestyle, great. Increase your protein perhaps. Increase your fiber. Drink a little bit more water. Those are key strategies as well for dealing with cravings. So, question for you, and you can comment down below, what food or foods do you crave the most? I'm curious to know what you guys are craving when you're stressed out or you're hungry. What do you want to eat? What do you want to consume? So just comment down below and let me know what's going on with that. So, question number 2. Is it okay to eat gluten? So gluten has become one of those things where all of a sudden everybody is gluten intolerant. Gluten is the new protein to demonize, and everybody believes they have some type of gluten intolerance. Now, the way human beings are, we tend to blow things out of proportion. When there's a new trend or something happening, a lot of people like to jump on the bandwagon. Human beings like to connect to one another, and as they say, misery attracts company, and everybody wants the problem du jour. Okay? So here's the fact of the matter when it comes to gluten. If you are legitimately intolerant to gluten, then yes, you should avoid consuming gluten. But here's one of the problems. A lot of people, without any type of lab testing or concrete evidence, assume that they're gluten intolerant and end up depriving themselves of a lot of foods that they actually like and enjoy under the false belief that they're gluten intolerant or that gluten is bad for them. Now here's the thing. If you're consuming a lot of gluten and you have an intolerance to gluten, that's going to cause problems. But the fact of the matter is, if you consume a bit of gluten every day, it's not going to break your body down and destroy you. Like I was saying in a previous episode of the Ask Miles show, if we really have a belief system that small little doses of things are going to dismantle us and affect us so negatively, we're literally going to have a miserable life. So I don't like to have the belief that there's something out there that can, create this chronic inflammation in my body. The truth is, there are so many variables that control inflammation and control health. It's not just gluten. What's your lifestyle like? How's your sleep? Your stress levels? Are you exercising? Those are the big pieces and pillars that are really going to have an effect on your physiology and your body and regulate inflammation. A little bit of gluten is not the end of the world. So if you are gluten intolerant, obviously avoid gluten. But if you're not gluten intolerant, don't be scared of gluten. You can, as an experiment, temporarily cut gluten out and see how your body responds. But one thing I've observed actually, which is quite interesting, when you cut something out and your body is no longer used to it, regardless actually of what it is, almost. And when you reintroduce it, your body almost has an immune response to it. Not necessarily because it's bad for you, but because it hasn't been part of your nutritional plan for quite some time. So if I cut out a certain food for 6 months or a year, and my body is no longer used to consuming that food, and then all of a sudden I throw that food back in, well, my body might have a reaction to that. And it's not necessarily that the food is bad, it's that my body has not been acclimatized to digesting, assimilating, breaking down, and absorbing that particular food. So you have to be careful when you cut stuff out and you reintroduce it. It's not actually always a sign that your body is intolerant to that food. So you have to be wary of that. So like I said, if you have a legitimate, real gluten intolerance, then yes, you should not be consuming gluten. For example, if you're celiac. However, if you're just someone who doesn't know if you have a gluten intolerance and you're eating a good quality source of gluten, something that's not overly processed, something that's good for you, then you shouldn't be too concerned. Now, if you're concerned that gluten is this thing that's causing these major health issues, before you attack gluten, I would suggest look at your life. Look at your lifestyle, your sleep cycle. Are you exercising? Are you eating fruits and vegetables? Are you drinking water? If you're not doing those things, you want to address those components and elements first, rather than jumping in and accusing gluten of being the culprit that is actually destroying your health. So look at all the lifestyle factors. Now, if you're sleeping well, or you're having a good sleep cycle, and you're eating well, and you're getting water and vegetables and fiber and all that good stuff, and you still have some stuff going on in your body, at that point, sure, you could explore, maybe gluten, or maybe dairy, or maybe something could be aggravating and agitating my body. But I would not start there unless the components of health and fitness are first addressed and your lifestyle factors are taken care of. So the moral of the story here is, when it comes to, is it okay to eat gluten? If you have a legitimate intolerance, don't eat gluten. If you don't know, work on balancing your lifestyle first, see how you respond. And from there, if you still have problems, you could explore gluten or other things like dairy, etc., as being some problematic elements. But don't just target gluten right away. There's other things to work on there. So moving on to question number 3. Are low-carb diets the best ones to follow? Great question. So the trend right now is to demonize carbs and to get rid of all carbs, which leaves us with what? That leaves us with protein and fat and fibrous vegetables typically. Well, carbohydrates, as I've mentioned before, are not bad for you. They've been demonized, and people think that carbohydrates are the root cause of all weight gain issues, but that's just not the case. So low-carb diets firstly work because of a few factors. Number one, if you cut out a whole nutrient from your nutrition plan, so you remove all carbohydrates, by virtue of removing a whole nutrient, in turn, you're going to reduce your calories. In addition, because carbohydrates attract water in the body, as soon as you remove carbohydrates, you also will lose water weight. So you're removing calories and you're releasing water in the body. Both of those things will cause a positive change on the scale. You'll lose weight. But are you actually having an effective result? Because at the end of the day, you want to lose fat tissue. You don't want to just lose water, and you especially don't want to lose valuable, metabolically rich muscle mass. So low-carb diets have become very popular because they seemingly work. Now, I'm not saying that they don't work. I'm just explaining that the reason they're working is not because directly they're low carbohydrates. It's because the calories have been reduced and your body has also released water. That's why you see the change on the scale. But the fact of the matter is, for most people, as long as you're in a calorie deficit, in other words, you're eating less than your body needs, you will lose weight. And there actually have been some little studies done and people who have tested things out. There was even a couple people who have some blogs on the internet where they did a diet consuming junk food Yeah, junk food. I think like Cheetos and chocolate bars and stuff like that. However, they were in a caloric deficit. And because they were in a caloric deficit, even though they were eating junk food, they were losing weight. Now, they had a challenge a little bit doing that because when you're eating junk food, it's very caloric. So if you're in a deficit and you're eating junk food, you're not going to be eating much food and you're going to be quite hungry during the process, which can be a little bit of a problem. But the point I was really trying to emphasize there is that by being in a caloric deficit, regardless of if it's low carb or not, you will actually lose fat mass. However, another reason that low-carb diets work is people use and abuse carbs all the time. Your insulin is out of control, your cells are not properly sensitized to insulin, and your body doesn't deal and handle with carbohydrates properly. So that's another reason. If you cut carbohydrates out abruptly, you'll have a favorable response in the beginning because your cells will resensitize to insulin, your blood sugar levels will start to regulate, cravings will go down, you won't be eating as much food. So there are a lot of different physiological changes that take place as a result of cutting carbohydrates out. So with regards to the question, are low carb diets the best ones to follow? Not necessarily. However, there are a lot of positive reasons as to why low carb diets work. Now, whenever you're following a diet, you don't want to just randomly do stuff. You should have a concrete plan behind what you're doing, which is one of the reasons why I always suggest it makes a lot of sense to work with a qualified coach. Somebody who can look at you, look at your example, understand the whole picture, and be able to arrange and adjust things for you for exactly your goals and objectives. A lot of the time when we just do things ourselves, we think, oh, low carb, just cut all the carbs out, and then you run into the problem of not having enough calories, being low on energy, creating sleep issues, creating cravings. There's a correct way to go about reducing carbohydrates if you're looking to follow a lower carb diet. But remember, lower carb doesn't mean no carb. And as I always say, there's no one set or magical diet. It's all about who's the person, where are they at in this present moment in time, what are their goals and objectives, what have they been doing up to now, what are their likes, what are their dislikes. All of those different elements will ultimately influence the best way to set up the plan. However, I will say it is true that a lower carbohydrate type of nutrition plan or diet for most people looking to lose weight, 10, 20, 30 plus pounds, is a great approach, but how you set it up and what you do, that's another story. So never just abruptly cut all carbohydrates out, otherwise you're going to tank your metabolism and create this false sense of being healthier, and ultimately that's not going to be the case over time. You're going to encounter a lot of negative consequences from not doing things correctly. So, question, are you guys currently following a low-carb diet? And if not, what kind of diet or nutritional plan are you following? Are you following more high protein, low protein, high carb, high fat, ketogenic diet, Atkins diet, zone diet? You can comment down below and let me know what type of nutritional plan you're following. I'm curious to kind of get an idea of what people are doing out there. So we explored three things today. We explored cravings, we explored gluten, and we explored low carb diets. Just to do a quick summary, cravings, they're going to happen if you're not eating enough food. They're going to happen if you're stressed. They're going to be a part of your life. And we mentioned how to deal with those things. You can have more water, make sure to eat more food, make sure to get enough protein, fiber, healthy fats. Those will help with those things. If you're having a stressful moment, brushing your teeth or chewing gum can help you deal with those immediate cravings by mitigating those emotional responses by changing your palate. Gluten, is it the devil out to get you? No. If you have a legitimate intolerance to gluten, then yes, you want to avoid it. If you don't demonize gluten, don't go after gluten. Instead, make sure your lifestyle is balanced and see how you feel. If you still have issues, then maybe you can explore gluten as being one of the components or culprits that's having a negative influence on your health. And finally, number 3, are low-carb diets the best ones? It depends on the person, depends on the situation. There are a lot of great reasons why low-carb diets work, but there's also a lot of ways that people screw low-carb diets up and create a lot of other problems. So if you are going to follow some type of low-carb regime, make sure you know what you're doing, or make sure to work with a qualified coach who can direct and guide you down the proper road and help you navigate that environment as to not have those negative consequences and negative repercussions. So guys, that was episode number 3 of the Ask Miles show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As I said, these are going to be weekly episodes answering your questions. So on that note, if you guys have questions, leave your questions down below in the comments, and I will be sure in the following episode or future episodes to address those questions. So take advantage of this. Comment down below. Let me know what your questions are when it comes to health and fitness. And like I said, I'll be sure to answer those in future episodes. So thanks guys for tuning in. Go have yourself an awesome day and stay tuned for episode number 4 coming at you next week. Bye guys.